Our talk tonight is hosted by Brett Goldberg. Brett is a three-time tech entrepreneur and current CEO and president of Specs, the leading SaaS property inspection platform for the insurance and construction industry. Based in Denver, Brett is a graduate of Duke University and a passionate Blue Devil. He was over at the football stadium trying to see what he could get into.
Basketball.
Oh, basketball.
Yeah.
He has been in sales and business development and marketing and product roles throughout his career. In addition to over 10 years spent with startup companies, Brett has been a senior product level marketing and sales manager at two larger publicly traded businesses. Brett has been a guest lecturer on several occasions at the Harvard iLab. He's also shared his startup experiences and knowledge in several other speaking forums. When not working, Brett is father of a 6-year-old boy and an avid Colorado outdoorsman. Focused primarily on skiing and hiking. With Brett's in-depth knowledge and experience, I'm sure went from a very informative session. So please join me in welcoming Brett Goldberg.
Can you guys hear me okay? We good? Okay. So awesome to be here today. Thanks for making it a few minutes of your time. I really appreciate it. We're going to get real prescriptive today. That's the way that I like to work. I certainly, when I cover this topic, which as Kevin mentioned, I've done it Harvard and a couple other places a few times now. I really like to get into the nuts and bolts a little bit of what I like to call the startup sales playbook, and also as part of that, this need for growth. I'll get into that topic as it relates to fundraising and how these concepts of sales marketing, go to market, really parlay into fundraising and then the business development activities. I should apologize for the blue. It's a lighter shade of blue than was intended on these particular slides, but hopefully you guys will forgive me, and it's great to be back on campus doing the Duke thing. What I want to do before we get started real quick and before I dive into some content is I want to make sure I'm kind of clear on audience. Can I get a show of hands real quick on those of you that currently run or are preparing to start an early stage venture? Okay, all right, pretty good. I'm wondering on the other side of this, I generally like to, with this content, present a bit of a workshop approach at the back end. I'm wondering if you guys might be a little bit interested in doing some elevator pitching coming up and maybe even taking a little bit of feedback off of how you come up and present as if we were the audience for an early stage meeting that you may have. And we can take this stuff, we are being videoed here, but we can take that content off of the video if you would prefer. So kind of thumbs up to that idea a little bit. Can we do that? Okay, that's great. So I'll go for about 45 minutes on this content, and then we'll segue our way into that and go from there. So we're going to hit a couple topics today. First of all, when I present this content, one of the things that's important to just level set on is what is the definition of sales? What are we talking about here in this particular context for this particular type of venture that we're talking about? This is not late stage public market selling with an enterprise sales team of 500 around the country. We have a particular definition that we're going to be using here. We're going to be talking about. We'll talk about strategies. We'll talk about processes. We'll certainly talk about some preparation that goes into the successful sales pursuits and activities that are associated with that work. Then we'll do some closing thoughts. I'll definitely allow some Q&A at the end of this, and then we'll do the workshop. If you have any questions that are just piercing you, you've got to ask me as we get into this. Go ahead and call it out. Otherwise, we'll do that towards the end. Kevin did a perfectly decent introduction to this content. You'll see some images at the beginning and kind of throughout of some movies, some Pixar movies and otherwise. Does anyone remember, by the way, on the Lorax, which was that first image? Does anyone remember what was being sold in that movie? What the particular product was?
Needs.
What's that?
Needs.
The Thneeds. Yeah. What was the Thneed?
Be a rug, sweater, lots of other.
I like the image in part because it's funny. I truly believe, and we have one of my former summer interns with us here today. But I sell based on needs. which ironically rhymes with needs. But in this particular case of that movie, I find that very interesting in the context of he generated a market, he generated interest, and he did so for a product and for an opportunity folks didn't even know they needed. I don't sell that way. First of all, we establish the need based on a solution to a problem that exists. I think the identification of problems that don't exist can be a risky topic, and we'll get into that a little bit more. I don't know if there's anything else other to say here other than one comment to make is that I've raised a lot of money during the course of these startups I've been involved with. Fundraising is the ultimate type of sales pursuit. So as we get into this a little bit more, while I'm not going to go into fundraising per se, a lot of what relates to that as it pertains to fundraising and the creation of funnels and otherwise is very extensible to that same type of topic. So back to you guys for a second and the audience that I'm talking to today. How many of you have pitched your idea to a sales prospect before? Okay. So feedback and otherwise in terms of what you've pursued is that's not where we are in terms of these stages? Okay, that's fine. We'll get into that a little bit more, but that's good to understand that. Let's talk about the sales methodology we're going to use here today. When I talk about strategies, I'm going to go into a few different concepts. So one of them is what you've heard the term, I'm sure, MVP, minimum viable product. We use the term in sales, minimum viable profile. Another synonymous term for that is use cases. What is the use case of the audience that we are creating this product and this solution for? Minimum viable profile is to say what is the most basic use case, the fundamental thing that we can sell this product off of in order to get traction. Because again, as I said a second ago, and I'll continue to harp on, this is about growth. And as it relates to getting a company off of the ground, any demonstration, all demonstrations of interest and engagement, and then whether it be monthly recurring revenues, annual recurring revenues, whatever the business model is the foundation of a company succeeding, getting off the ground, maybe even becoming one of those unicorns we increasingly hear about today, whether it's called Uber or otherwise. So minimum viable profile, we'll talk about a little bit more in terms of a strategy. Multi-level coverage, MLC, is another strategy I'm a big fan of. That has to do, it gets a little bit more mature as you get into larger enterprises, but it is about pairing off with different folks, with different buyers, with different audiences within the target prospect that you're going after. The adoption curve, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, absolutely essential here in terms of finding those early adopters, gravitating to them, and selling to them successfully in order to get reference accounts and some other activity moving. As we get into sales processes, we'll talk about the sales funnel. We'll talk about this notion of multi-touch engagement with sales prospects. We'll talk about appointment setting and trialing. In sales preparation, we'll discuss the audience, the needs, the pitch, and then we'll hit a couple other topics before we wrap. So when I started to think about this content over the last couple of years, I remember myself, in fact, thinking for a while, I'm not a salesperson. That's not what I am. But the reality is, especially I think in this type of environment, everyone is selling in some capacity. You're selling to recruit people onto your team. You're selling to fundraise. You're certainly selling to grow your business to sales prospects. Selling is a fundamental part of what we're doing. It contrasts, in this case, this is more of a consultative and a strategic approach. It may contrast what you would find in that later stage, mid-stage environment where there's more of a transaction taking place. But make no mistake about it, this is selling. And it's especially selling in the business kind of market development sense of we are growing an opportunity, we are growing a market segment, we are growing something that is intended to be part of a larger equation, part of a larger solution going forward. Again, we're not going to discuss fundraising specifically, nor are we going to dive specifically into business models or pricing, but I'm happy to answer questions about that. We can get into that topic a little bit more later on. Let's talk about some strategies. So segmentation, use cases, and micro focus. I would contend that out of everything that is most important, you hear all these different, what matters the most to a startup, the thing that matters the most is focus. The thing that matters the absolute most is the ability to focus on what it is that you are doing at your core and what it is that is being provided as a solution to an audience that has that need. And so When we talk about micro focus or the MVP, the minimum viable profile, we're talking about what is the absolute core audience, user type that can engage with this product today, even if it's not fully baked out. Even if you're at version 1.0 and it's going to be version 2.0 potentially before that person's commercially buying in a significant way, there is an opportunity with the MVP level to get folks on, get them engaged, get their feedback, and then get them hopefully evangelizing you and even becoming a raving fan over a period of time. Consultation and relationship building and the effective application of what I like to call jazz hands. This concept is one in which I feel like, and Mark can recall this from this summer with us, we do this all the time. With our particular company specs, there are things that we have today and there are things that we don't have today in terms of our product, in terms of our product market fit. And so I joke, obviously, about the notion of kind of getting up there and doing hand waving, and the reality is that's happening to a certain degree. You are selling yourself, you are selling the needs that you're addressing over time, you're selling a solution, you're selling a consultation. You are not necessarily selling something that is fully baked, fully ready today to be consumed by that prospect. And so hopefully those jazz hands close up over time, and you're selling based on the true merits of your product. And in the meantime, it is a dialogue that's taking place, and it's a maturation of a relationship that's unfolding as you get to know each other more. The adoption curve and the diffusion of innovation we're going to talk about more in a second, as is the case with multi-level coverage. Are you guys generally familiar with this? This was initially a concept that appeared. Jeffrey Moore, I think, gets credit for this concept about 20 years ago in Crossing the Chasm. 100% accurate still today, 100% viable. What I like about this particular version of the adoption curve is this notion of effort that's also being attached to working on these opportunities and working your way from the earliest of adopters, in this case called the innovators at about 2%, 2.5% of the curve, to the laggards at about 16%. Now, I'm going to talk about something real time and practical for a second. So our particular company specs, as Kevin mentioned earlier, we're a property inspection platform for the insurance and construction industries. Insurance technology is almost an oxymoron. That's how antiquated this industry is. What we're replacing today, by and large, for our users is a clipboard, graph paper, and digital camera solution, which has barely changed in 25 years. The industry is largely at a laggard state. We realized very quickly, I realized as I got involved in the business, we had to find, even in that industry, the early adopters, the innovators, the folks that demonstrated those kind of behaviors where they wanted to be ahead of the curve, where they wanted to define their brand based on some kind of an innovation. And increasingly, many of the large insurance carriers, top 10 P&C carriers like Chubb or State Farm, are actually creating innovation groups, which have been, by and large, in the case of the insurance carriers, the folks that we've sold to. Those are folks that are looking for something more strategic. Those are folks that are thinking about how do we change our operations, how do we change our workflows. And so even in the case of a laggard industry, we're trying to find those users, those buyers, that audience that can speak to us in this kind of more innovative or early adopter kind of state. Does this all generally make sense and jive? The one thing I would say about this too, and going back to the effort comment for a second, is to say when you look at this and when you think about kind of in the box these activities associated with it, there's not a lot of marketing spend on those things. We're talking about word of mouth, we're talking about case studies, we're talking about success testimonials, and that's stuff that can be repackaged easily and frequently, whether it's on your website or in certain versions of Marcom. As you get later into these industries or into these adoption parts of the curve, we're then talking about workshops and town halls and travel and coaching and spend. And that's one of the risks of working with those folks, is they need to see proof. Show us what you've done. Show us the 20, 50, 100 companies that preceded us that can tell us this thing has worked great. You eventually will get there, and hopefully you've generated enough revenue and or capital raised in order to start on those more significant spends. So I first got acclimated with this concept of multi-level coverage. I worked for a large tech BPO named ServiceSource, which works with companies ranging from VMware to Blue Coat to Aruba to AT&T. And that was really the place where this notion of multi-level coverage became interesting to me. It is a concept that applies a little bit more to later stage companies, and yet I see us needing to apply this concept at our company specs today. And that is to say, pair up. And and think about the different folks that are involved in the audience that you're selling to. More often than not, if you get trapped selling to a single person at a company of any size whatsoever, you're putting yourself at significant risk of that deal either not coming together as smoothly or as quickly as you would like, or potentially losing that deal down the road. That person may no longer be at the company. And so it's about establishing multi-levels of coverage, of engagement, of buyers, of personas at these companies. And this is an example at Startup X, selling to prospect customer Y, how that might work and what that might look like, but I think you get that concept. And so even at the ones that are our prospects today, David, our co-founder, or myself, or others are looking at this and saying, how are we pairing up with the innovation group, with the different functional areas we're selling to, and how are we making ourselves more infused into the overall conversations that are taking place at that entity? Let's talk about processes. Ari, I'll go back to you on this one. So we've got Finding Nemo here. What's the what was Dory, who was played by Ellen DeGeneres? What did she say? What was her theme?
Short-term memory issues.
Yeah, she did. But what did she keep saying that was critical? She said, just kept swimming. Just keep swimming. She said that, and I actually, I mean, I find myself, and Mark knows this, I find myself saying that on a regular basis, because one thing I definitively hear on a regular basis working on a startup is the word no. I hear it in fundraising conversations every day. I hear it in sales every day. I literally hear that, and in my mind, I say, just keep swimming. Just keep swimming. And at this point, and I know you're laughing and you're going, it's ridiculous. And yet the reality is, for me, from a persistent standpoint, and increasingly looking at this, I don't really hear the no's a whole lot anymore. I hear the feedback, and what I hear when I hear no is I often will search for that. Can you give me a little bit more? Can you tell me what it was that you were looking for, that if I had delivered certain objectives, you might have latched onto in order to start to say yes? Can we stay in touch while we continue to build towards those areas so that over time your no may become a yes? So that's the concept. That's why in part I like this image so much. We'll talk about funnel management and we'll talk about forecasting here. The multi-touch stats are pretty interesting. I'm going to share in a minute, and then we'll talk about appointment setting and trialing. So I put together a very, very, very basic version of a sales funnel here. And there's a few things that I want to take you guys through when I do sales funnel activity. One of the great things that's happened in the industry for startups with technology is you can put a sales funnel tool in place today, extremely affordable for your organization. You could pay $10 or less per user, get a tool like Capsule, and start to keep track of this information, not only as it relates to contact information, but as it relates to starting to put together a funnel to say, we have 40 prospects we're working on, and here's where they are in terms of their particular stages. Now, the reason I think this is so important, and the reason I really harp on forecasting, even at these early stages, is because you have a what's called an LTC, a likelihood to close percentage, that get associated with the stages. And to be clear, I have an example of a 1 through 5 stage sales funnel here. You could create whatever you want. It's whatever makes sense to your organization, whatever reflects your sales process. And the likelihood to close factor is what allows you to say, hey, we've got this awesome new deal, beta is coming in, great, except that, Mark, they're at stage 2, and based on every deal that we've seen get to stage 2, that means they have a 10% likelihood to close. If they're moving down the football field, they've barely gotten out of their end zone, let alone the likelihood of them actually closing on some certain number of units that you're trying to sell them to. So this is about objectifying this. This is about the science of sales. This is about looking at this information and starting to make sense of it in a way that's much more empirical and data-driven, as opposed to saying, I had this call yesterday and it feels right. It feels like there's going to be something that's actually going to close there. Have you validated budget? Are you on the same page as far as objectives? Do you have product market fit with this organization? Those are the questions to be asking yourself as you move this forward, so that hopefully over time you can actually start to put a likelihood to close percentage that's higher and a close date associated with these sales opportunities that's legitimate. I think that's all I'd call out about this. I am going to pause for a second though. There's a lot within this. Any burning questions that this creates? Yeah.
So this percentages, is it based on some algorithms on the likelihood that it's 5% probable, 10% probable of getting the deal?
I do. So if we were to use this 5-stage approach as a particular example, we would be putting a percentage on them to say, from what we've seen, from what we know, if something gets to stage 3, that has a 50% likelihood to close. If it gets to stage 4, now we're talking about a 90% likelihood to close.
It's more of historical experience on this one.
If possible. It will take a while to actually form that experience in a way that you can truly feel good about. But in the meantime, I think it makes sense to put some numbers down and to start to forecast accordingly, and then validate or invalidate those hypotheses. And just keep running them through and seeing if, okay, actually, we got the budget from this person, and yet it didn't close on time as expected. Maybe we're off in terms of our likelihood to close calculation for that particular stage.
Thank you.
Sure. We've heard this term used a lot lately. I don't know about you all, but I'm getting contacted constantly these days from organizations, SaaS folks, HR firms, PEOs, folks that are trying to sell things to me. And the term professional persistence is one that seems to be making its way into the language a lot more frequently these days. I get why. I mean, these stats are quite staggering, really, and I'm not going to take you through every one. But the first one says, simply put, it takes 8 times on average to get someone's attention now, as opposed to 3 times in 2007. There's just so many more ways to communicate. And sometimes it's text, and sometimes it's email blasts, and sometimes it's personalized email blasts that felt like it was a very direct message to you, but it came through MailChimp, and it was probably sent to everyone that showed up on some kind of a list that company bought. So it's critical to get more touches, as many touches as possible. We'll talk about when and how those should actually appropriately be conducted. But the reality is you need to be out there, and until someone says to you no, I say you keep going in most of the occasions. Some of the other stats are pretty amazing here in terms of what salespeople on average do or do not do in terms of their activity today. But just because someone's not responding to you or someone's not engaging with you quite as accurately as you would like, doesn't mean you necessarily walk away from them. We had a particular interesting example. There's a large insurance carrier, which I'll keep nameless, that we're selling to at this particular time for specs. And this company said to us a few months ago, they said, look, here's the deal. We're one of the largest P&C insurance carriers in the world. What we think you're doing is really interesting, but we're not ready to buy today. But here's how this could work. You stay in touch with us on a regular basis. You get in touch with us maybe every 1 or 2 months. Give us information. Tell us what's happening in the industry. Consult to us. Inform us. We will reciprocate that information as best we can share about what's happening with our business, and maybe over the course of the next 1 to 2 years, we'll buy something from you. How does that particular engagement sound? And I said, well, given who you are, I think it actually sounds pretty great, and I appreciate you setting that expectation with me about when this thing's going to actually close or not close in terms of a deal opportunity. So I think it's about getting that engagement going and starting to build a rapport, which, amongst other things, you're using different types of touches, whether they be email or phone, or let's get together at the upcoming trade show or event conference, as a way to keep these relationships going. At the end of the day, there's a huge part of relationships that make these things move or not. So just to continue that, I'm still fleshing out this concept in my mind, but this idea of multi-touch with personalization is one that we're trying to figure out how to scale up. And that is to say, be in touch on a regular basis, communicate valuably, communicate in different forms, whether it be email that's direct or not. Sending out sometimes just a simple email to say, hey, wanted to tell you about this blog post that we just wrote, want to share with you this interesting article we just read, is informative and can be a way, based on the particular relationship that you're working on, in order to establish a rapport with someone that can be very valuable. Text, phone, face-to-face. I get text messages these days from folks that are trying to sell to us, saying, hey, when would be a good time to get on another call with you? When would be a good time for us to get together face-to-face? So even that is creeping in increasingly as a way to engage. And I say any outreach is good as long as it comes with information, with content. Here's why I am contacting you, Brett. Here's why I'm reaching out to you at this particular time and asking you to respond. And as long as it comes with respect. more often than not, if I feel like something's not interesting to me, I will tell them, I'm not interested in this now, we're not interested in this for 6 months from now. And if they violate that information and get in touch with me sooner, then we have a plan at that point in time, and we don't need to necessarily waste their time or ours between now and then. You know, the trialing and pilots is it's just part of the reality of the startup sales environment, and it's tricky, and it has to be done well, and it has to be done thoughtfully. But it is a part of what happens in an early stage market, in a place where you are trying to get traction. And so I've seen this happen multiple times where I've done it in various cases. We're doing it right now as we speak with Specs, and we have a fall trial program going. And the keys to the fall trial program for us was about establishing the objectives first and foremost. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? What value proposition are we trying to prove out? Who are the customers on the adoption curve that might connect with this value proposition? And then on the other side of a successful trial, knock on wood, become those case studies, become those references, become those raving fans. That is the process in a lot of cases that's necessary in order to implement some kind of a trial or pilot program, even if it doesn't have dollars attached to it. That's okay. Growth is what matters here, and growth can take on forms besides MRR, ARR, or other kinds of business direct financial metrics. Timing is critical. What is it that we're trying to accomplish here over what period of time? Endless trials for endless periods of time don't go anywhere. They're not successful. So put a period of time on it, be flexible to that timing, and if it's 30 days, if it's 60 days, great, stick within those boundaries and prove out what you're trying to accomplish during that particular window. Aligning objectives to outcomes. Set those objectives out to begin with. What are we trying to accomplish? What's the goal for your organization that's going to make you as an organization better off? Okay, you're looking to reduce this KPI, you're looking to increase that KPI. Let's work on those objectives. And if we can't get them completely finished or completely accomplished during the course of the trial, let's at least be aware of those things so that on the other side of this, we've given you an indication that if we move forward in some kind of commercial relationship, we can achieve those things for you. In pursuit of raving fans. That's what we're going for here. We're not necessarily looking for major dollars in these trials. We're looking for folks that are going to get excited about this, folks that are going to talk to other colleagues about this, folks that are going to potentially stand alongside you at trade shows or events. That is the objective of these kinds of trial environments. And like I said, I've never seen in a startup a situation where it wasn't necessary in some shape or form. So I think seriously considering what the trial environment is that makes most sense for your organization, for your goals, is critical, and then executing right on that vision is essential. Let's switch gears to sales preparation. I'm from Denver, so we certainly like Peyton Manning, even though there's some debate regarding his skills and if they're dwindling or not. You know, but the thing is that whether his skills are dwindling or not, what Peyton Manning is notorious for is his preparation, is his game preparation, is what he puts in at practice, what he puts in training camps. And it's a funny image because I think he's literally icing an ankle injury he had last year while doing some studying of the playbook in the hot tub environment. It's a similar concept from a sales preparation standpoint. Know your audience. Know who it is, if possible, that you're going to be presenting to. Even today, Kevin and I were emailing, and Haley and I were as well, to say who's going to be here today? What's their interest area? Where are they in terms of their interest for I&E? Are they graduate students? Are they undergraduate students? Are they not students at all? And so understanding styles and tones and what they like. Are they interested in fishing? Are they interested in the outdoors? Are they interested in particular hobbies that you may be able to play to? What are the names of their family members? Do they have any kids that you can ask about when you see them? Those are all things that go into the preparation and things that should make their way into the CRM that you use, whether it's Capsule or Salesforce or otherwise. Those notes become invaluable as you start to scale out, and as one person goes into a meeting that you may not be a part of, having a little bit of that context and background can move the ball forward in an efficient way. Certainly understanding the org chart is essential, and that's where multi-level coverage can come in. You may be spending a lot of your time having conversations with someone who is not the decision maker, who does not have the purse strings on the budget, and that is the worst in terms of wasting your most precious resource, which is your time. So really understand that audience going in effectively. understand customer needs, also essential, and yours, by the way, don't matter. It's about listening. It's about being attuned to what are the problem statements that this organization is addressing. Why are they talking to you? What is it that they're trying to get out of the relationship with you? And the relationship piece is important. The names of their kids might be valuable, but at the end of the day, they are trying to improve their particular lot inside their organization, whether it's to get promoted or whether it's to improve some kind of a P&L consideration on their balance sheet. Understand those things acutely and listen for the clues. They may not always come out as specific, pinpointed as you thought they were. Expect the unexpected. There might be screens that aren't working. You might not be able to connect your HDMI adapter up. You might not have connectivity to the Wi-Fi like you thought you would. Those are things that you absolutely have to be ready for. Murphy's Law kicks in almost every time without fail. Take those extra steps to prepare for what it is that you're going to encounter in the environment you're walking into, whether it's a go-to meeting or some kind of other virtual environment or face-to-face. Let's talk about the intangibles. I think everyone's probably acutely aware. When I went to school here a while back, this concept of EQ, emotional intelligence, it wasn't even a formed topic yet. It's actually unbelievable to think that. But EQ, I would contend, especially in the environment we're talking about, matters as much, if not more, than IQ. It's listening for the subtleties. It's understanding the interactions you're having with the people that you're talking to and what it is that might be driving their interests, their behaviors, their motivations, their desire to talk to you. I also say drive to know. And I say no is the second best answer you can get in a sales pursuit like the one we're talking about to yes. Maybe's the worst. Maybe's the absolute worst situation because it can be a time suck. And so I would much rather in a fundraise environment, a sales environment, have someone tell me no than have someone sit there and put me into a maybe cycle that I'm not sure whether I want to try to get out of or not. So drive to it and don't be afraid of it. Value the feedback at the same time. If you get the no, and more often than not, someone feels a little bit bad giving you a no, especially if you've established a good relationship with them, then just extract the feedback from them as well. What was it that has you saying no to me now? Can we talk again at some point in time when my product has improved, when the situation has changed, when you have more budget in Q1? Those are the things that you can ask for and you can hopefully solicit some valuable feedback around. And I say just listen, and listen a lot. And don't necessarily feel like you need to talk at all times. Sometimes the just being quiet and listening to the environment that you're in, waiting for someone to say that extra thing they might have been hesitating to say can get you more of information than you thought you would have gotten. Okay. I'm not a huge Yankees fan, but I sure loved Mariano Rivera over the years. Sorry, this went too fast. Okay. He was a great closer. Closing is a huge part of these sales pursuits. Know when the sale is done. Know when it's time to say, well, let's move to that next step. Even if that next step, guys, is to say, let's get a trial off of the ground, and up and running on November 1st. We've been talking for a while now. We understand what your objectives are. We think we can meet those objectives. Let's get the ball rolling on something. Again, no is a fine answer a lot of times, and no may come with valuable feedback. But don't be afraid to ask for these the close when it's the right time. Couple tips and tricks I want to mention. I've got a host of things here, and I'm not going to walk you through each of these. I can get this information to you guys afterwards as well. There are a few things I want to call out here. First of all, a lot of tools these days, a lot of effective tools these days, including a very legal platform called Yesware, which is an extension of your email. Yesware is a tool that says you can actually see when you send an email, when that person opened that email. That is interesting at times, and it's interesting information to understand, but it gets visibility going into things. Okay, I just sent off an email to Mark Siegel. It specifically asked about our meeting tomorrow that we're going to be having. Did he read that? Did he not? If he didn't read the email, maybe that gives me some information that I need to understand in terms of where his head is at or what I'm going to communicate with him when we have time tomorrow. MailChimp is an example of one of these great SaaS mechanisms. We use it constantly for email. Great tool that can come across very personalized in the email distribution. Great tool that can be used for high volume email delivery as well. And email remains the most extensible, the most valuable tool from a marketing standpoint. It's not that expensive. I think we pay $25 a month for a MailChimp license, and it's a great tool that a non-technical audience, myself included, can use to communicate with potential customers and extract some interesting analytics from. Capsule, I mentioned, is one of those CRMs. There are others as well that are great for starting to log data about customers and customer prospects. Envision is an interesting tool, and one that I absolutely would subscribe to these days. Envision is all about product design. Envision is all about demonstration of prototypes, demonstration of what it is that you might be building that doesn't necessarily have any code base behind it. We use it constantly for presentations of what's coming down the road, what's happening on our roadmap, what is V3 going to look like. Again, not a particularly expensive license, not a particularly difficult tool to use, but one of those things that you can use to present what it is that we're building, even if you don't have the iOS or Java developers or otherwise that have completed the code in association with your product designs. HBR is amazing. TechCrunch, LinkedIn. LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a particularly useful tool. I like LinkedIn as a general tool for understanding the folks that I'm reaching out to and the folks that I'm going to be meeting with. Sales Navigator takes it one step further in terms of lead generation and actually seeing information that may be coming from folks that you're not connected to on LinkedIn, but that you would like to be prospecting to. Just a couple last things I want to mention. I love this image of Sisyphus. I had a great Greek mythology teacher in 7th grade, and little did I know when he first told me about the story of Sisyphus, this was the person who was banished to Hades, and his punishment was perpetually rolling a ball up a hill, which came back down on him every time he seemed to seemingly get to the top. That's how I feel a startup is a lot of the time. There are good days, there are bad days, and more often than not, even if you feel like you're having a good day, that ball is probably coming back down the hill on you at the end of the day because a call goes awry, a prospect isn't as interested as you thought they were, and you're doing it again the next day. That professional persistence, that desire to keep going is one of those things that I certainly subscribe to in a very significant way. The ball's rolling back down the hill. Be steady, be consistent. Don't get too high, don't get too low, because you're going to be, if you're interested in this thing, if you believe you have something, you're going to be doing it hopefully for a long period of time, and you're going to be steady as you do it. I say at the same time, don't sprint a marathon. Pace yourself, and especially during these sales pursuits, as much as you might want to show an opportunity, as much as you might feel like you need to get that deal in, be patient about it. And if someone's not giving you the yes that you're looking for, then keep adding folks into the sales funnel. Just keep swimming and just keep adding folks in, because you're going to have to backfill on a regular basis, whether you're closing these deals or whether you're not. So you just keep going. I say grow, or I say you die. I mean, that's the reality of this, and that's where this, as much as anything in your startup, yes, having a great product matters a lot, but get it out to market and get folks looking at it and get folks trialing it and get folks giving you feedback. Because if you're not showing demonstration of growth, even if it's with engagement metrics, you're done. You're not going anywhere. So showing that and demonstrating growth, even at the most basic KPI level, is an absolute essential part of moving your business forward, moving your venture forward. I want to talk in a Q&A fashion now. What questions, topics did I bring up that you guys have questions about for me, or questions to ask? What didn't I bring up that we should talk about? Yeah.
When we talk about a sales funnel and how many leads you convert, what's your experience with that in a startup environment versus like an established, firm that's got a product everyone knows?
It's extremely low. Your conversion metrics are extremely low, and especially in their early days where you don't have credibility, where you don't have much of a reputation, where you don't have reference customers that you can point to say, oh, you have that need? Well, 5 other customers we've worked with had that same need, so let me parade them out in front of you in the form of a case study and otherwise. So you have to assume your conversion metrics are going to be extremely low, and you have to build up your sales funnel accordingly and with that expectation. One of the things that I subscribe to is finding smaller audiences within those larger pursuits. So make them smaller in a way to say, hey, look, this particular customer could have 50 users, but we don't need to start with 50 users. Let's just start with 5. Let's get 5 of your users on. Let's get 5 of your users to be evangelists. Let's get 5 of your users to then internally be able to speak to others inside their organization and sing the praises of what it is that you're doing for them. And that is a viable pursuit. So in most cases, we're identifying what is the initial user base at a company, and then what is the longer term user base at the company. And there may be a very long period of time until you fully convert that entire user base, but you can get some pilots and trials and otherwise going with the smaller group in the meantime. Yeah?
Was that show demonstrated growth and talk about API? Could you provide clarity about that?
Sorry, ask the question again.
Show demonstrated growth. You mentioned the word API.
KPI.
KPI, sorry.
Yep. And speak to that a little bit. KPI is key performance indicator. It's going to change. It's going to be defined by you for your business. I can't speak consistently to the KPIs of any given organization. I can say in my organization today, there's 2 KPIs that matter. The number of new users that we're putting on the platform month over month, and the number of inspections, which is our primary engagement metric, that are being conducted on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. Now, a general number that I hear, and this is more business to consumer than business to business, is that your company, and especially in a business to consumer environment, should be growing about 5 to 7% week over week. Wow is the KPI that sometimes gets referred to. And that may vary a little bit, and you may not be able to show that right away. But as Mark knows with our company, we started tracking that early in the summer, and we watch it every single week. And it's one of the things we look at every week to say, did we or didn't we show week over week growth of 5 to 7%? Maybe one week we didn't, and that's okay, because maybe there was a lagging indicator in terms of a new sales opportunity, which took an extra day or 2 to get started. So we'll be showing more positive results next week as opposed to this week. But if you're seeing a repeated trend after 3 or 4 weeks or 5 or 6 weeks where you're not showing growth at that kind of level, that might be a flag to you to say something is wrong. We need to change our approach. And let's get in front of this thing before this becomes an actual problem, which could affect anything from our fundraising objectives to other significant parts of our business going forward. Yeah?
How can we apply the sales funnel to investors and fundraising?
I think it's the exact same approach. I think, literally what I showed in terms of just a sales funnel template could absolutely be applied to fundraising. Whether we're talking seed stage fundraising with high net individual angels, or whether we're talking some kind of a little bit later stage seed prime, Series A, Series B raise that has venture capitalist firms, for example, associated with it. It's a sales pursuit. And understanding what are the steps that go into our sales process is completely the same approach to where are they? Are they at the stage where they're now starting to do due diligence? Have they signed a term sheet? Are we close to getting a term sheet in place? Those steps can be identified and methodically pursued. I certainly feel on a day-to-day basis that fundraising psychologically and emotionally feels the same. It's getting someone to make an investment in your business. You are selling your business to them as part of it. So I treat it in the same way from both the science perspective as well as the psychology of. Yeah.
In the so-called stripped down elevator pitch,
Yeah.
what is important to include, and what can you afford to leave out of that pitch?
Let me start with what I think oftentimes should get left out. The elevator pitch. It's very easy to go into the details of here's what my product is. My product is an iOS and an Android app that does this and that and has these great features and collaborates with a dashboard on the back end and then shoots out a report on that, on the other side of that. The most important thing is what are you doing? What is the need you're solving for? What is the pain point that you're addressing? What is the problem that's being resolved by your particular solution? So hopefully I'm going to see a few of you guys do some presentations here in a second, but it really starts and I think it even ends with that. We are doing this thing because in the case of specs, We're replacing the clipboard and the graph paper. We're replacing these analog tools of 25 years ago, and as a result, we're creating better efficiencies, we're creating a faster inspection process, which results in better customer engagement and results in better data and analytics for the insurance carriers. And that's what we're doing. And if that doesn't resonate with someone, well then, maybe you take it a little bit further, or maybe they're not the right audience for you, but I think it really starts and ends there, and then you take the engagement forward. The other thing I think is really important, and whether it's called an elevator pitch or whether it's called a cold call, I think generally applies here. As Mark knows very well from this summer, and not that he ever did this ever, but one of the things that is you get an audience, and by the way, you don't get a lot of people to return your phone calls as a startup, and you don't get a lot of people to actually give you an audience or give you attention. And one of the things that can happen is you just go, I got everything to share with you right now. Let me tell you everything we've been doing over the last year and a half. Let me tell you everything that's exciting about our business. They're not that interested. They might be a little bit interested. They may be curious. They may have a need that you align to, but understand their needs and keep the ask real simple. Hey, I'm just talking to you on the phone. Thanks for an audience for 5 minutes. I know you're having a busy day. Should we schedule a demo? Maybe in a week? Could we get another phone call? Could we come out and see you in a month when we're going to be in the Chicago area anyway? Keep it simple as you move the process forward. It's like any kind of relationship, and if you're spewing out too much too soon, you're probably going to leave that person overwhelmed.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for undergraduate students on how we could develop our sales skills?
Boy, that's kind of a question for Kevin, I feel like. I think it's one of those things, I'm curious sort of what the environment is of today at Duke, so I'm going to play this back on you a little bit, but I would imagine there's not a lot of sales classes. There's not a lot of go-to-market classes. Am I fair in my expectation of that? Yeah, so look, amongst other things, I would say consider internships and consider those opportunities where you can get on the phone and start making those calls and do some cold calling and really have those opportunities to do the elevator pitch. It's surprisingly painful. It's surprisingly difficult. And for probably a lot of you in the room who've had very little failure in your lives, very little situations where folks were telling you no, it's a lot of humble pie on a regular basis. So finding those environments, whether it's called a sales class or whether it's just called an internship where you say, hey, look, I'm willing to make some calls. I'd like to go through that process is probably one of the best steps I could recommend. Kevin, anything you'd add to that?
I would add on yours just the straight informational interview, being able to get someone's attention and just talk to them about yourself and ask if they have a few minutes. Just the process of getting on the phone, an email with someone, a Duke alum, is a great just kickstarter to that, feeling comfortable and talking about yourself in a few minutes and then listening to what they have to say. There's a couple courses that a local entrepreneur also teaches that if you want to reach out to me, I can give you his info. The other thing is there's American Underground has a lot of startups that you can just basically go around and see what you could do to help sell their product as an intern. I mean, those would be three real easy ways to do it.
I mean, as I&E continues to build out here, I mean, this is a new area of the university that had 4 folks, I think Haley said, working on it as of a couple years ago, and now has 30 resources dedicated to it. There's more and more, I think, refinement going into the content, to the curriculum here, and I certainly know, myself and others are very happy, as Kevin alluded to hear you on a phone call and walk through it in kind of a mock trial type of environment, or I'm sure there's going to be increased content and classes that are offered in this particular areas. Yeah.
So, if you really have some good idea, one of the questions that always comes to my mind is, how do you protect it? Like if you're doing prototyping, those kind of things, you're exposing the idea to certain customers.
Yep.
And there's always a risk
Yep.
of it being hijacked.
Yep. Yep. So there's a lot within that question. I mean, I guess my question back to you in part is, are you talking about the intellectual property risk of exposing your idea to a customer and the customer potentially running with that idea?
Yep.
Now, I mean, I think that's legitimate, and it's look, I mean, we've had this situation happen recently. We've had a couple customer prospects say to us, and I think ethical organizations will do this. They've said, what you are doing is very interesting to us, and oh, by the way, we're toying with doing this idea ourselves. And so for that particular reason, you might try to convince us that we shouldn't be doing it ourselves, but we're giving you the heads up that we might be trying this ourselves, and do we want to continue this dialogue or do we not? And we've amicably walked away from a couple of those situations. So I do think it's possible that an organization will say to you, this is hitting competitively in a way that we're thinking about. How do you want to proceed with that? I think also there does come down to, look, there are situations where you can present confidentiality agreements, and sometimes those, in terms of your intellectual property protection, are viable. A lot of organizations won't sign those. You're some tiny little shop, tiny little organization trying to get their attention. We don't need to sign documentation with you, so you can try it. But I don't think it's often going to go well. I think it comes down to just being thoughtful about what it is that you're communicating with them. If you have something that's critical in terms of a database element or something that's proprietary, you might be able to speak to that. Doesn't mean you have to share that. Doesn't mean you have to demonstrate that even necessarily. Get them engaged. We're showing you, 90% of what we've got, and there's this 10% that we're not quite ready to show you yet. Maybe we can sign an NDA at some point in time or otherwise before we would proceed with that outstanding Delta piece. Yeah.
So when you talk to the customers and they deliver like what they want actually, right? How quickly you transfer those needs to your minimum viable product? What was the cycle looks like? And if the customer was only interested in engaging in a conversation, would you even treat their needs seriously to develop your product?
I want to make sure I understood that question, which is to say, how much time you have for your minimum viable product to achieve the needs that they're striving for?
Yeah. So I guess my question is, as a company just starting out, right?
Yep.
Most likely they have some needs that you haven't met yet, right?
Yep.
And then let's say you have a couple customers that you engage in a conversation, right? Which one, I would assume that the resources are packed, right? So you're gonna have to set priorities and translate those needs back to your product.
Yeah.
So how would you, what was the cycle looks like and how?
So right, I mean, we're literally, we're in the process of doing this. We have a customer base that's growing today, but we felt like there was an opportunity in the fall timeframe to roll out a series of fall trials. And in these fall trials, I mean, one of the first things I've said is, look, I'm going back to our sales funnel and saying, are you interested in a fall trial? We're doing this in the month of October for 30 days. Let us know what you think. If we get them interested in that, then it comes down to this product market fit scenario, which is kind of what you're asking about. Here's what we have today. Here's what our product does today. Here's what your needs are. What's the delta there? What's the gap there? If we're not getting it perfectly, are we getting it close enough that you're going to get something valuable out of this trial? That on the other side of this trial, maybe you're not quite ready to sign up for the full commercial contract, but we're going to be continuing to develop over the course of the trial. So then maybe we're even closer in 1 month than we are today. So there's not a perfect answer to this other than to say, find that minimum viable profile, that MVP, as close as you can get to sticking onto that. That's your first set of customers, even if they're small, even if they're not huge by name. And then beyond that, it's really understanding from a needs assessment where your product is today versus where they're trying to get to. If the gap is too wide, stay away from them, come back to them when you're further along, and if the gap is close enough, then roll the dice. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about building out a sales team and what kind of qualities you look for in salespeople and how you set up incentive structures to motivate them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an absolute customized case by case situation. It should be part of the gentleman to your left's concept that he's interested in terms of sort of this topic and how you build this out. I think the one thing that I will say is the earliest salespeople need to be a bit willing to deal with ambiguity. A startup environment in its very nature is highly ambiguous. It is highly undetermined. There are things, even value prop, that are still morphing, that are still changing, that you're still learning about on a daily basis. We thought speed was the KPI. We thought that's what we solved for companies, but we realize now it's efficiency. You'll learn those things through trials or other tools that you're rolling out. So the early salespeople need to deal with ambiguity, and oftentimes a more transactional-oriented salesperson isn't comfortable with that, isn't familiar with that, and if they've been selling at larger stage companies, they're interested in a rinse and repeat, quota-driven process to say, you want me to do this, wind me up, and I'm going to go do that for you time and time again. Too much ambiguity can cause problems. Too many problems can cause an unsuccessful relationship, which would just meant you probably had the wrong type of salesperson at the wrong time. Now, what I would say in a lot of situations is the person needs to be highly tenacious. They need to be a hunter, someone who is really driven by growth, and you should compensate them accordingly. You have to say, and you can't say to them, look, this is a risk-reward scenario. We don't have what you would necessarily like in terms of base, but our OTE package, everything that you're able to earn, could be more if you're successful with this particular endeavor. And then, as best possible, wind them up, point them at where they're supposed to go, and hope that they're the kind of salesperson that goes out tenaciously and doesn't take no for an answer very easily. Those are a couple of my comments. We can expand on that more if you want to follow up with me afterwards or whatever, but that's some of what I'd say to start with. Yeah?
How can you amplify word of mouth and increase the number of evangelists?
How do you increase evangelists? Well, I'll tell you what, we have we're fortunate to have an advisor to my business who gave me the answer to that question recently. This particular gentleman sold his company recently for a very, very large sum of money after taking the business from nothing to a significant amount of annual recurring revenues over 7 years. And he said the answer to that is a product that people love, or at least they could see themselves starting to love and really finding value around, and then building great relationships with those people. Really getting into a place where you understand them, they understand you, they like to hear from you, and not only are you providing them a product that is creating true value for them, but they like you. And it really becomes as simple as that. And if you have a market opportunity that can actually start to develop, that word of mouth will start to unfold. Now, you may have to ask them, hey, would you mind if we put together a case study? That we'll write it, but you just need to bless it. Would you mind if we take that really fantastic quote you said on the phone the other day and we put it up as a testimonial on our website? And that kind of stuff, oftentimes, if you're doing that, if you're creating value for them, is something that they're willing to reciprocate. It doesn't cost them much. And if they're willing to put their name on it, it can be significantly valuable for you. One or two last questions. Yeah.
I've got some questions about early stage development of a conceptual product. How do you find, or what's some good ideas to find those early adopters, find that market that's going to sort of piggyback on that question, that was going to adopt your product, that's going to help you get into the early adopters and from that board on?
I think part of it is asking around. If you have advisors to your business, if you have directors to your business, investors in your business that understand your business, and by the way, I should just make that very clear. I increasingly believe these days, I increasingly advocate for subject matter expertise in your business. Whether it's an advisor, whether it's an investor, whether it's one of the co-founders of your business, be careful venturing into an area that you don't have subject matter expertise around. And part of subject matter expertise is understanding the network, understanding the market. Who are the folks that we should be selling to? Who are the folks that have adopted products earlier than others? There's in the insurance world, there's a particular insurance carrier who in the last 2 months have produced articles. They actually went out and produced articles to say, in one case we're using Google Glass, in another case we're using drones. That is a huge pursuit for us at this point in time. Someone that's willing to go out and put themselves out in that way, using technologies like those, certainly should be using my technology. Now, maybe they're not the right fit for X, Y, and Z reason, but that to me feels and looks like an early adopter that I'm going to go after as aggressively as I possibly can. Those would be some of the suggestions I would have.
Okay. The other part of that, or the other question I had, was about the market research. And when do you personally, when did you make that decision? Is this a market I want to get into, or what's that criteria that you look for to jump into?
It's been quite a while since I've been involved in a startup where I just simply said I want to work at a startup, and I'm going to go find an opportunity. For us, in the particular case of Specs, the opportunity came from the field. The opportunity came from a co-founder who said, I've been a long-time insurance professional working on this particular problem. There's a problem here that needs to be solved for. I tend to gravitate towards those type of opportunities a little bit more than just saying, I'm going to go read some research studies and see if there's a problem that needs to be fixed or a disruptive solution that needs to be created. So that's been a little bit more my approach, both as an entrepreneur and an advisor and an investor and otherwise these days. But it can take on different forms. What I don't necessarily subscribe to is spending a lot of money at the outset buying market research, which can be incredibly expensive and isn't necessarily always best packaged and most helpful to getting an idea off the ground. Okay. Great. We've got about 25 minutes left to go. I would love to hear a couple of pitches. Can I get a huge show of hands regarding anyone that would be willing to come up and just give a very brief elevator pitch to a room of prospective customers about what it is that you're working on? Yeah, let's do it.